The 2025 India-Pakistan conflict, how a regional war shook the global economy. In the spring of 2025, the world watched in shock as a familiar fault line exploded. Along the tense, disputed border of Kashmir, India and Pakistan, two nuclear-armed rivals with decades of mistrust were once again on the brink. But this time, the clash didn't fade into diplomatic silence. It spiraled into a full-scale military confrontation, and the consequences reached far beyond the battlefield. Over 1.6 billion people in South Asia found themselves caught in the middle of geopolitical chaos. But as missiles flew and tanks rolled, a second disaster began to unfold. One that didn't make as many headlines, but left a deeper scar. An unprecedented economic aftershock that rippled through the entire global system. This video isn't just about what happened on the front lines. It's about how a war in South Asia triggered a chain reaction in oil markets, financial exchanges, global trade, food supplies, and household economies from Asia to the West. What really sparked the crisis? It all began with a deadly skirmish in Kashmir. These are not uncommon, but this time was different. Within hours, both India and Pakistan mobilized tens of thousands of troops. Airspace was closed. Diplomacy collapsed. Tensions escalated faster than the world could react. As jets roared over the Himalayas and artillery fire echoed across villages, something equally dangerous started breaking: investor confidence. Within 3 days of the war, panic spread across global markets. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Markets in freefall. India's benchmark Sensex index dropped over 12% within 10 days. Pakistan's KSE 100 was halted 4 times in a single week as it plunged into chaos. Foreign investors rushed to exit both markets, triggering massive capital flight. The Indian rupee slid past 90 INR per USD, a record low. Pakistan's rupee collapsed beyond 370 PKR per USD, spiraling inflation even faster. Credit rating agencies downgraded both countries. Bonds were dumped. Risk models across the globe were recalibrated to account for a new, unpredictable threat: a possible nuclear conflict in Asia. Pakistan's economic collapse. For Pakistan, the war was a devastating blow to an already fragile economy. Debt was ballooning. IMF constraints left little breathing room. Inflation was already out of control, and the war pushed it off the edge. Defense spending jumped 40% in just 1 month. IMF talks were frozen. Foreign currency reserves fell below $1.8 billion. Inflation soared above 45%. Food prices doubled. Then came the real blow. India suspended the Indus Waters Treaty. That shut off a critical water lifeline. Farmlands dried out. Crops failed. Diesel and fertilizer prices exploded. Protests erupted across rural Punjab and Sindh. Karachi, the country's financial core, was paralyzed. Rolling blackouts swept major cities. The energy crisis became national. India's economic pressure points. India's larger $3.7 trillion economy gave it more cushion, but it wasn't immune. Tourism plunged by 60%. Tech giants froze hiring. Foreign direct investment fell 25% in Q2. Billions were rerouted from infrastructure to military needs. Key reforms stalled. India's global image as a rising, stable investment hub started to erode. Worse, India's exports were severely impacted. War zone disruptions in Pakistan, Iran, and Afghanistan shut down key overland trade corridors. Indian exporters had to rely on slower, costlier sea routes, hurting competitiveness and raising costs globally. From regional conflict to global crisis, what began as a border war quickly evolved into a global economic threat. Oil price surge. Fighting near the Persian Gulf raised alarm bells. Rumors of Iranian involvement and militant activity near the Strait of Hormuz sent oil soaring, hitting $118 per barrel. That spiked global fuel costs and added new strain to already fragile energy markets. Flight to safety investors fled risky assets. Gold passed $2,600 an ounce. U.S. Treasury bonds surged as fear took hold. The VIX, Wall Street's fear index, hit levels not seen since the early COVID-19 pandemic. Shipping disruptions. South Asia is a crucial part of the global shipping network. Ports in Mumbai, Colombo, and Karachi faced partial blockades, missile alerts, or outright shutdowns. Cargo insurance premiums spiked 40%. Shipping times to Europe rose by up to 15 days. Freight costs on Asia-Europe routes surged by 30%.
Europe, a fresh economic blow. Europe, already recovering slowly from COVID and dealing with ongoing energy issues from the Russia-Ukraine war, got hit again. Gasoline prices in Germany, France, and Italy jumped 15-20%. Stock markets like the DAX and FTSE fell around 8% in 2 weeks. Industries dependent on Indian IT, pharmaceuticals, or textiles experienced delays and cost spikes. Governments were forced to extend costly energy subsidies. Inflation forecasts were revised upward. Eastern European economies reliant on South Asian imports started facing shortages and supply chain breakdowns. The US, strategic shockwaves. Even across the Atlantic, America felt the tremors. Wall Street plunged. The Dow dropped nearly 1,500 points in a week. Tech giants like Google and Microsoft faced delays due to disruptions in their Indian outsourcing hubs. The Fed postponed interest rate decisions, citing geopolitical uncertainty. Meanwhile, gas prices in parts of the US breached $5 per gallon, igniting public anger during an election year. Diplomatically, Washington was stuck between a rock and a hard place, balancing its deepening ties with India and the need for peace. Urgent calls for ceasefire followed. The White House and State Department launched non-stop negotiations. The diplomatic rush. As the war dragged on, the global response escalated. The UN Security Council convened emergency sessions almost daily. China, fearful of instability near its western borders, began shuttle diplomacy. NATO increased readiness in the Middle East. Gulf nations rerouted oil exports and activated maritime defense protocols. Eventually, a fragile ceasefire was brokered, led by US-China diplomacy. But the economic scars would take much longer to heal. The cold reality: war has changed. This war showed us something terrifying. You don't need a world war to shake the world anymore. All it takes is one localized conflict in the wrong place, and every economy, no matter how distant, starts bleeding. Food prices, oil, jobs, investments, shipping, technology, everything is connected. Everything is vulnerable. Final takeaway: the 2025 India-Pakistan war wasn't just a military crisis. It was a global economic stress test, and the world failed. Both India and Pakistan will spend years rebuilding, but even giants like the US, Europe, and China were forced to face a hard truth. In today's economy, peace isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. The next war might not involve bombs or tanks, but cyber attacks, currency manipulation, or supply chain sabotage. If we learned anything from this war, it's this: global peace is not just a diplomatic ideal, it's the foundation of economic survival. What's your take? Can South Asia rebuild before the next global shockwave hits? Should nations prioritize economic resilience over military dominance? Let us know in the comments. Join the conversation. Like, share, and subscribe for more deep dive, no-nonsense global breakdowns.